Hi, everyone, and welcome to a conversation with Marvel Studios' visual development team. My name is Sam Benzon, and myself, along with manager AJ Vargas, work with this amazing creative team of concept artists. I'm sure everyone is super excited to be back at Lightbox Expo 2020. And because we're able to do this event virtually, we actually get to chat with team members from all around the world. And with that, and as you can see by our many panelists joining us today, let's go ahead and get started. And I'll introduce these talented creators. First up, we have Ryan Meinerding, VP of Visual Development and Creative Director. We have Andy Park, Director of Visual Development. Visual Development Supervisors, Jackson Z, Rodney Fuentebella, and Ian Joyner. Senior Visual Development Artists, Anthony Francisco and Jana Schirmer.
Jana.
As well as Karla Ortiz, Phil Saunders, Jerad Marantz, Imogene Chayes, Constantine Sekeris, Alexander Mandradjiev, Keith Christensen, John Staub, Phil Boutte, Musk Rizvi, Tully Summers, Saskia Gutekunst, and Henrik Tamm. Yeah, a lot of people. It's very exciting. So with that, I'm going to hand off the mic, so to speak, to these brilliant folks. This panel is going to be a bit different from your typical setup. As the title suggests, we wanted to create a space where folks can just talk and have a conversation. So we're going to have the visual development or VisDev vets interview the VisDev newbies and vice versa, as we have team members who've worked on designs all the way back to Iron Man, as well as newer folks, as the team has grown a lot recently. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hand it off to Ryan. He's going to give us a quick rundown on what exactly the VisDev team does here at Marvel Studios, and then we're going to just dive into the conversation. Ryan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. So Marvel Studios VisDev is sort of a unique team in the film business, in that we're a team of concept artists that have been around since the early days of Iron Man, and essentially are there to develop the heroes and villains of the MCU movies. We've been very fortunate to sort of, when we end up getting a character designed in one film, we also get to work on that character in subsequent films, usually. And we're a very close-knit team. We hang out a lot, at least when we could. And we're essentially one of the internal processes at Marvel Studios that is sort of integral to the filmmaking process. And we're very fortunate to be able to be there at every stage in the process. We're there, usually some of the first people working on the films, through pre-production, working with directors and producers, presenting our concepts. And, sometimes even in post-production, we will get to sort of look at the characters again and try to improve where they were, or if the filmmakers have new ideas, we're sort of brought in to throw some concepts up on the wall and see what sticks. As we started off with a relatively small team, and obviously as Marvel Studios has grown, we've also grown, and we are able to hire all of the amazingly talented people that you see before you. Well, to start, that's sort of my spiel about VisDev. We're excited to be here at Lightbox. To start us off, we'll go to a couple artists who are currently helping to inform the visual language of the MCU post-snap. Can you each speak to your experiences at Marvel Studios, Jana and Saskia, and how has the illustrating concepts with VisDev maybe been different than previous jobs that you've had?
My name is Saskia Gutekunst, and I'm a fairly recent hire here at Marvel, and I'm really glad to be on board. And it is, when it comes to the work progress, not too different from my previous work in games and animation, but what is very different from Marvel, for me personally, is that I need to always keep in mind, that things look good on the actors, for example, or that I need to take lots of care about thinking about the material. Is it even possible to build a costume like this? These are things that are very different, because usually when I work in, let's say, stylized animation, then I usually do not need to think too closely about things like this. So this is a very particular learning experience for me, and I'm really glad that I get to experience that.
Yeah, for me, it's similar. Like Saskia, I was working mostly for video games for my previous jobs, and yeah, what she said, I can second that, but also it's actually my first time since like 7 years that I'm in a studio, of course, post-COVID. So for me, the biggest difference was like working in a team again, and especially I feel like the team at Marvel, everybody is so good, you know. I was just so blown away by the amazing talent, and it always keeps me for pushing myself also, you know. So I guess that's, for me at least, it's very different that now I have a team, and yeah, just trying to push myself, because every time when I see what everybody else is doing, it makes me want to push myself further too. And it's great that we are all artists, so like the art direction is always pretty clear, and it's just a lot of fun to work there, and it's like probably my most favorite job that I've ever done. And yeah, I'm excited to see all the stuff to come to life at some point. So yeah, that's it. I want to ask a question to Andy and Jackson, actually. So you both are very integral artists for the MCU history, and I would like you to talk a little bit about your journey, and also if you could explain how the team has grown and evolved now that it's going into phase 4. That would be great too. So yeah.
Thanks, Jana. Hi, Andy. Yeah, it's been a crazy journey. I got hired by Ryan and Charlie 10 years ago. And the beginning of my career, I was a comic book artist. So I used to draw for Image Comics, got hired by Rob Liefeld, and I drew for Marvel. So, and I grew up as a kid reading Marvel comics. So Marvel comics was always kind of like my first love as far as like characters and art. So being able to, you know, work here, like I remember when I got that call from Charlie and Ryan asking if I wanted to join them on a movie that they're going to be working on called The Avengers. I think even before they asked a question, I said, yes, I am coming. It was one of those dream job offers. And it was an experiment, because this whole group is something that was created essentially by Ryan and the early days with Phil and Adi when they were helping to create Iron Man. So it was something that Marvel saw as, this is something that can be very valuable to create a team that's, as Ryan mentioned, that's not something that really exists in Hollywood. But that it would behoove them to kind of create this group, knowing that there's going to be so many films coming up and they're all connected. So I got hired, and for the first 6 months, it was essentially like me, Ryan, Charlie, and Phil was there too, and we were working on The Avengers. You know, it was an experiment. They didn't even have space for us really, so they threw us in basically at the actors' dressing rooms, and that's kind of where our offices were. And, you know, for 6 months, we were, you know, on 1 week, we'd do one character, the next week we'd do another character. And it was one of those things, like, we didn't know if The Avengers was actually going to be successful, because, again, that was the type of movie that was what has never been really done in Hollywood. So it wasn't a sure thing. So, yeah, there was just 3 of us, or 4 of us, essentially. And then eventually Rodney, and then Jackson got hired. And 10 years later, you know, now look at all the people that you see here, but, you know, we've gone up to like 30 people at certain points, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And back then, if you were to ask me 2010, like that we would be here 2020, experiencing Endgame, the highest grossing movie of all time, Black Panther, being nominated for an Academy Award, and being able to work with this many artists, I mean, throughout the world, it's definitely been a dream job. It's definitely been a dream experience, and it's amazing. And I can't believe that we got to all experience this. And I'm just looking forward to the future, phase 4 and beyond. There's so many things coming up with all the movies, with all the Disney Plus. So it's evolved in ways that I could never have imagined.
For me, journey-wise, was fortunate enough to have studied under and from Ryan and Charlie back in school. So when they called me up to join the team, I was very excited. I was originally tasked with doing some early explorations on future films, but eventually they moved on to help out on the Avengers. And I got a chance to learn from the best. Like Jana was speaking, the amount of talent on this team is incredible. And I'm still learning every day. So I kind of transitioned from an environment concept artist into somebody who does character design and keyframe illustrations as well. And thankfully having been taught to do that from like Ryan, Charlie, and Andy, and everyone on the team. As far as like phase 4 and like evolving of the team, I'm really glad that we have so many projects so that we can get more artists here. We're discovering new voices. I'm learning from them. I get to like work with artists that I've admired for a long time. And also with discovering new voices, learning from them, I'm also trying to share what I have learned from Ryan and Andy and everyone else on the team and helping the new artists to also achieve success at the studio. And that's the most rewarding part of this phase 4 expansion, expanding our scope of projects and discovering new voices.
Okay, I have a question for Jerad, Tully, and Constantine. Turning now to some artists who not only create great costume concepts, but incredible creature concepts as well. As you all know, we're tasked with more than just designing the superheroes and supervillains for a movie or TV show. We're also asked to build entire worlds, including imaginative creatures and monsters. Can you guys talk about your process when it comes to creature design?
Sure, thanks, Andy. Constantine, should I start?
Oh, please do, yeah.
All right, for me, it's about efficient visual storytelling. Oftentimes, the creatures that we're asked to design are secondary or tertiary characters, which means they don't get a lot of screen time to explain who or what they are. So it becomes really important that they read quickly and visually tell the story of what they are in a short amount of time. When that story is them being mean or scary or even cute, that's relatively straightforward. But if the story's asking for something a little more complex, like them being noble or loyal or conniving, then it becomes more challenging how to visually convey that really quickly. What about you, Constantine?
Well, the thing is with creature design, especially for Marvel, it's a little bit different, especially if some people know my background in practical effects and whatnot, and Tully, and also Jerad as well, and also Ian. We've kind of all started in the practical world, and so I think that kind of helps also understand to some degree sometimes when we are challenged to do a makeup design versus just a digital creature, or sometimes to be able to blend the two. And so with Marvel, though, there tends to be, you have to give always homage to Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby really established the sort of aesthetic early on, and with Stan Lee and whatnot. And then, having then Ryan, Charlie, and Andy and everyone now, really kind of like establish that sort of like taking the Kirby aesthetic and really kind of like giving a more of a sophistication. And so it's kind of fun to be able to see what with each creature design or with a character that it all stems from Jack Kirby. And so I have to always remind myself, especially when dealing with any sort of creature design with the MCU or with Marvel in general, is that's where it's established first. And so my job is to then come in and see how to be able to translate that in a sophisticated way, and also, and as you mentioned, Tully, make sure it plays with the rhythm and the tonality of the film. And each and now, depending on some of the films, we can go a little bit edgier, but we want to play. You always want to play to a nice, colorful, sort of creature that tells a story and really is something that fits in the world that with Marvel. And again, that all kind of stemmed, for me, from Jack Kirby. And so always, from the Hulk, to all these sort of like, from Beast and just many other, creatures that we haven't tapped on yet that we're looking to really kind of like get our hands on. In that regard, I'm going to pass it on to Jerad. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the question was talking about process when it comes to creature design. So it always starts with usually the source material. So obviously, great writers are pulling from things that exist from the comics. And so we, step one, look at those designs, how they've changed over the years, and then try to make them real, which is always a really fun journey. So it's usually a combination of the source material, the director's sensibilities, what fits in the story, and what we as artists bring to the table. And it's an incredibly fun challenge. Personally, I always struggle with not going too horror based. I usually have Ryan, Andy, and Ian pulling me away because of my personal background. I do a lot of very scary things, and so I think one of the only reasons why I've been able to get anything on screen is because every now and then someone will tap me on the shoulder and tell me that that kids are watching these movies, and then sometimes something shows up on screen, which is really nice. But it's always been that process of starting with the source material, seeing what fits with the story, and just jumping through those approval hoops of like, okay, do they like what I'm doing? What do I change? And aside from that, I would say in terms of design process, I've been mainly working in 3D. I believe, Tully definitely, Constantine, like 90% of the time. And it's because creature design is so complicated. I find that it's harder to get it approved from one angle because it's not something the average person can just kind of turn around in their mind. And so when it comes to creature design, I tend to personally overdo it and design everything at all angles. Sometimes I'll do turntables just so that I know that the idea is being conveyed. And then the cool thing about that is, so many of the designs that we do are CG characters. So the models that we produce then go to previs and then go to visual effects to go through their pipeline to eventually show up on screen. And I've had a couple of experiences that have been very rare to just Marvel, where I'll work really hard on a model, and I know that when I look up on the screen that at the very least that model was the base for what the visual effects team worked with, and it's very accurate. And I don't always get that when I work with other teams. Sometimes you'll turn in a 3D model and it still goes through quite a process before it goes on screen, so it can actually change a bit. And I've had some one-to-one that's been really rewarding, and it's been special to just working with Marvel. And then I have to ask the next question, huh? Yeah. So I'll do that. Okay, I'm going to pretend I'm not reading from something. Anthony and Ian. Speaking of creatures, pivoting to the creator of Baby Groot himself, Anthony, you, along with Ian, have contributed so immensely to the look of the MCU. What is it like taking classic comic book designs and translating them into contemporary designs for today's audiences?
Oh man, it's a dream come true sometimes, because first and foremost, I'm a Marvel fan ever since I was like 5 or something. X-Men was one of the first things I kind of gravitated to, and the Hulk. So now that we're in film, it's like a full circle. It just feels like really like rewarding, I guess. And I'm really happy that our team is a great team to work with, and everyone's just it's just giving so much inspiration to work harder and think of new ideas. But what's nice is working with this team is like Ryan, Andy, and Charlie. They used to they're able to get the trust of of like Kevin Feige, and we finally kind of have that trust, and we're able to really push the boundaries of the stuff we translate from the comic books, the source material, into the film. So with that confidence in mind, it gives me confidence to just push the ideas more. And I still remember when Ryan gave me the task of trying to figure out the fight between Doctor Strange and Thanos. And he's like, come up with something epic you've never seen before. And like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But yeah, it was, but I'm up for the challenge, and stuff like that is really what, inspires me to do more. And I'm glad that we have the opportunity to do that. So, but when I come up with ideas for designs, usually I try to think of a story. Like, story for me is really king. So, like, for example, with Adora Milaje, when I try to come up with a design for them, first comes the feeling. So I decided I wanted to present them as lionesses in the Serengeti, like hunting. So they're in that color, in that pose. So that, I think that's what made it have the badass feeling that it's promoting. And yeah, so in terms of taking that design for the comic book, I went with like how it is in the comic book, but try to transform it better for film. And it's just been a blast ever since. Been here for like 8 years. I was supposed to just be here for like 3 weeks, and now it's this long. So thanks, guys, for having me here. I'm really grateful. But Ian, another amazing, talented guy that, just tell your story.
My story, where does it begin? No.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, one of my favorite parts of this team is the love that is given to the source material. And you've got this rich history in the Marvel Universe that it would be easy to just say, well, we're going to make it however we want to see it. But we always go back to the source. We always look back to where, what made people love these things to begin with, and what made them work. And then add to that or subtract to that to make sure that the story is actually being benefited to. For me, probably the highlight was working on the Skrulls. I was one of those kids who just was obsessed with the Marvel cosmic stuff, and the Skrulls in particular were one of those things I just thought were awesome. The gigantic weird eyes and the ears, and just so much fun. And we all took passes on them from very comic accurate to going completely different with it to see what was going to benefit the story the best. And it came full circle to something that I think really paid homage to the original Jack Kirby stuff, and also just the very many iterations that have been in the comics. And actually, I think Constantine mentioned about not just making digital characters, but also working on makeup effects.
And remember your Thor stuff too, your creatures from, those are looking really cool.
The creatures were like demons and strange. This actually echoes back to what they were saying about making sure that with a first read, you understand what that creature is going to be about. What is the important read that you get on that? It's not going to be, oh, is that a friend or a foe? You instantly can see if it's on screen for a moment, that is a villain. That is a good one. But something like the Skrulls, which was fun, and hopefully spoilers of a movie that already came out could be okay, but we'll just say that the misdirects and things like that were really fun to kind of explore with, where they may look villainous, but maybe they're not. You never know. So I just had such a blast always going back to the original stuff and trying to do storytelling and working with this team that always pushes you to not only pushes your artistic ability, but even your technical ability and thinking of how you might achieve something, which leads me into my question. So Phil Saunders, since we have multiple Phils, Alex and Henrik, you guys have been with the team for a very long time. Phil, actually, since Iron Man 1, working on that and helping bring that iconic suit to life. Sitting back here. I'm just curious, how do you guys find yourselves using technology in terms of, I know from Iron Man 1, there was everything from pencil sketches to full digital models being made, but I'd love to hear about how you guys use different types of technology to achieve the concepts that you're trying to bring to life.
No, I guess for me, Photoshop is my main tool. I do keyframes, and if I could, I would probably use oil paint, but I can't do that anymore. I used to. But I find that to be the fastest and most versatile tool for me to use. It's I used some 3D as well, but I use that as sort of a tool to gather other people's ideas and designs into my toolbox and use that then in turn to paint on top of. But Photoshop is my main tool set for sure. Alex?
Well, I love to use sketchbooks. I love to start with just even sticky notes. That's because I could be anywhere. I could be sitting on my couch or even...
What happened to Christopher Walken? You
going to talk over me through the entire thing now? Okay. Hang on. Let me finish my thought before I lose it. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Photoshop and After Effects. I like to kind of combine all of those three and sort of see what comes of it. I like to experiment with my medium. And one day I'd love to try what Henrik mentioned, except with gouache, to try to do little frames. And yeah, how about you, Phil?
Well, yeah, I mean, as Ian mentioned, I mean, on Iron Man 1, my first sketches were pencil sketches and marker sketches. That's my roots in gouache painting. So, the 2D side of it is really where I feel the most comfortable. So Photoshop, in terms of just the level of expressiveness that I think you can get from a painting, particularly if you're doing, keyframes or something that's really storytelling related, something that has to have a lot of emotion. It's for me, there's a very long process when you're working in 3D or in ZBrush sculpting, both of which I also use as in my toolbox. But to get to that place where you're able to get mood and atmosphere and emotion takes such a long time. And I like to start with that from the beginning. So for me, it's just being able to go in and paint a silhouette where you've already got the pose, and you've already got the emotion of the face, and you've already got the atmosphere and the lighting and everything from the very beginning, and that's sort of informing your design. And then for me, if something gets approved from an illustration, then I might go on to ZBrush and sculpt it and do the back view and all the details in that level. But yeah, I mean, as far as keeping up with technology, it's something we always have to do because there's all kinds of cool stuff coming out, and they're tremendously useful tools. I don't have any free time to suddenly learn a new program, so it's always every project that comes up, okay, am I going to use this project as an opportunity to teach myself Blender or some new aspect of ZBrush or something like that? That tends to be the way I keep myself updated. But truly the big love for me and the big passion, and I think the place where VisDev excels, is the storytelling side of things. Very much, I think beyond what you have the opportunity to do in a traditional art department, we get to look at the script early on and contribute, our take on it, and sometimes even influence the story, since we're on, sometimes before there's even a script, when there's just a beat sheet. So I wanted to ask Ryan and Rodney about their experience with having the opportunity to maybe solve some story problems through art or through gag reels, coming up with different ways that things can happen, in a character beat or in a battle or something like that. So want to take it away?
Thanks, Phil. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about working at Marvel is, and trying to keyframe illustrations, especially early on, is that you're honestly trying to you're basically trying to show the filmmakers a frame from their movie before the movie's made. So you're having to make lots of decisions about, taking what they have in the script or the beat sheet or the outline, and then you have to create a scene for it. You have to pick where the characters are. You got to figure out a way for that fight scene to work. And essentially all those decisions come together into one image that could be a condensing of like a bunch of moments, or it can be, something that is actually an instant in the film. And doing that early on is one of the most fun parts of the job at Marvel Studios. On Iron Man 1, I was fortunate enough to work on a few of the keyframes for sequences in that film. And one of the ones that Jon Favreau had tasked me with was, what can Tony be doing when he's building the Iron Man suit for the first time? And so he didn't necessarily know, and they didn't have it written in the script at that point, what he was going to be doing in the garage. So I ended up doing a shot of Tony like really uneasily hovering on his boots, and the comedy in his face, and the reality of like, oh, I'm trying to fly in my garage, and I've got all this. The other point of the image is he's got his car collection around him, and he's got all his tech, and you're sort of setting those things up to sort of suggest this could be a fun way of looking at the sequence, to be able to see what a guy that's flying for the first time in sort of a place that he has a bunch of treasures, like what that would be like. Yeah, I don't know, that it's to me, doing keyframes like that where you're able to explore, and you can suggest things and see, if any of those ideas can work with the film that the directors and the producers are trying to make is one of the best parts of our job. Rodney, what do you think?
I mean, like, one of the fondest memories I had was when we were working on Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ryan tasked me to do like, all right, there's going to be a moment where Hulk and Hulkbuster are going to fight each other. And I remember I was like, oh, how is that going to play out? Because the interesting thing about that battle was, it wasn't like Tony and the Hulkbuster was there to destroy Hulk, but he's there to subdue Hulk and make sure, like, because Hulk was in his Hulk rage, how could we make it so that there are things that the Hulkbuster could do to just subdue the Hulk and not make him do as much damage as he can do. And it was great because we were all like this room, and then we had, we gathered together, and we were meeting for about like an hour or so and just spitballing a bunch of ideas. And it was great because, I was like sketching out things on Post-it notes and putting out on the board over in the back there. And we were all kind of just coming up with cool ideas of like, oh, what if he does this? What if he has some kind of like spray that could kind of put Hulk to sleep? I'm like, oh, that's cool. How is he going to do it? Maybe he can subdues him. And it was fun because we were like trying to come up with all these fun ideas. And I got to say, like, playing video games and like just coming up with some fun ideas. I was like, oh, what if he does this? What if he like pounds him a lot and just tries to subdue him, make him just do all these things that could have a fun battle between Hulk and Hulkbuster. Those are the things that are fun to do. And from that, I did a bunch of sketches and kind of showed it as like a sequential kind of gag pitch. And we had a couple ideas of like, they're fighting each other, and I think I had one drawing where Tony and the Hulkbuster like hit Hulk, the point where the Hulk spit out a tooth, and I think some of that kind of makes it into the final product. But that's the great thing about what we do here at VisDev is we sometimes come up with some ideas, and it's a group effort. It's like I only could come up with like this amount of ideas, but together it was great to just see what we all had, and we took all those ideas and kind of come up with like just a bunch of drawings to see like what we could do to make that moment as special as we can. So that was one of those fond memories I had. So I got a question for Imogene, Keith, and Mike. How's it going?
Not too bad.
Cool. Seeing as you all come from a more costumes background, can you speak of your process in coming up with character concepts? How do you go about like researching, and how do you stay inspired after painting and drawing sometimes hundreds of concepts for our projects?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Well, so I'm relatively new to to the Marvel team. And the process of actually being responsible for coming up with designs is actually a new thing for me and something I'm still learning, because before this, I would work exclusively for costume designers, and I would get pretty much most of my direction from them. And my responsibility would be to, yes, make a sellable image of this character, but to also make sure that it's something that can be interpreted to people down the pipeline, those actually making the costume. So it would actually be used as a tool. And I'd have to look at it more technically in making sure that the costumes on these characters have all the correct seams and construction points and all that for other people to interpret. And now working for Marvel, I have to think about everything, including, you know, the character's pose and their life background and all these things. And it's challenging for sure, but it's a lot of fun. And now I've been thrown into the deep end with keyframes as well. So that's a whole other ball game. Yeah, what about you, Mike?
Yeah, I come from a costumes background as well. Also a little bit of games. I find the easiest way to research the characters for myself is through the source material, for sure. Not just like the who, but the why, the metaphors, and what can I exploit within the design. Usually that ends up, what ends up usually happening is me trying to communicate the story, whether through shape language, fabrics, color, or all of the above. It's definitely easy to be inspired by like all the talented people here. Like that's like a given for sure. But I think another way for me to kind of push myself through coming up with a lot of different designs is by switching up the tools. So sometimes that can be, if it's drawing, if it takes me using my sketchbook, if it comes to me using 3D, whatever the case, I think that's one of the big differences I've seen with Marvel compared to other studios, is just allowing that freedom for that exploration in general. What about you?
For me, I came to doing costume design through starting in the late 90s at creature shops. And after, kind of in the middle of the digital revolution, all those shops were transitioning to doing a lot of specialty costume work. So I got more heavily involved with that, and then found opportunities to work in costume departments and went from there. But my process, because of that, I think centers a lot more around a sculptural 3D sense, because my practical background is, design, sculpt, cast, paint, a physical fabrication approach. So it's a little bit different in that way, but I think there's enough parallels between creature design and character design that it translates, and it just offers a different perspective from a traditional costume fabrication standpoint. As far as research and stuff like that, my interests are through anthropology and archaeology and history in general. So it's the awesome thing about this job is I get to pull from all of these things that I'm interested in anyway, and I have a library full of books, and it's an excuse to kind of deep dive into all of these things that maybe I wouldn't necessarily go to check out. But as far as motivation goes, I'm sure a lot of people here can relate to this. It's almost like we have a weird compulsion to make images. And I mean, if I would do it, I'd be doing it no matter what. And I can't really explain, what that is, but when you have a job like this, it provides you opportunities and problems to solve. And, someone is kind of focusing that urge to create those images. And then on top of it, they're paying you for it. So it really doesn't get any better. It's pretty great. I think I'll leave it at that.
Hey, Karla.
What's up?
I have a question for you. So as a Marvel Studios vet, can you speak to a character design that you worked on that you are particularly proud of, and why are you particularly proud of that character?
So first and foremost, wow, I'm a vet. I'm expecting something in the mail, I guess, Ryan. A little Thanos thumbs up gauntlet. Oh man. Yeah, I just realized that. Wow, I've been on this for a bit. Okay, so back to the question. There are a lot of super fond characters and designs that have had the opportunity and honor to do. Like just off the top of my head, like working on some of the zany characters from like Thor Ragnarok. I did one of the three-headed creatures, in which one of them ended up being Taika, so that was super cool. Working for Black Panther, that to me gave me a lot of joyful moments, and even working on some of those costumes, even though like none of mine made it to the end, but there's still lots of like little elements that still kind of made it through the process. That to me felt really special, because that was a fantastic team, and we all kind of knew how like important that movie would be. But if you're talking about my heart, and this is something that I say often, because, my first project was Doctor Strange, and the ability to have been able to, create a character whose like design almost, if not identical, made it almost 1-to-1 in the movie, minus a couple details. That to me meant a lot, especially because I still remember the day Ryan called me. He's like, "Hey, Karla, they chose your character." And I was just like, yeah, on the phone. And he's just like, Karla, come down. It's okay. And I'm like, I'm so sorry for the ear damage I've given you. But so I think that one, and because there's a special something that you don't ever expect your paintings to, your designs to make it to billboards. And when you do see it, you're just like, my son. But you also have to let go of your son, because, people, that's the magic of movies. Like it's a collaboration. So my design was given to the costume designer. She took it, and did the things that she wanted to do and made it better, or added her voice. And then you have 3D, and that design travels throughout the different movies. They take their own shape. So kind of like your son, you let it go to college. Goodbye, my son. So yeah, I think that to me meant a lot. But anyway, listen, Phil, Musk, John, I got questions. All right. So speaking from one artist to another, did you always know you wanted to be a concept artist? And kind of similar to Rodney's question earlier, how do you stay inspired after like so much illustrating? Because there's so much.
Who wants to go first? Want me to go first? I think I did not know I wanted to be a concept artist, actually, and I have a few of the guys here in this group Zoom to thank for it. Which is I started in film long ago. I was a child actor, and I worked and kind of was growing up in the industry. Decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and so I went to college and I learned to draw, because that was like my second passion that I really liked to do. And I did different avenues. So I did production design and art direction, and I kind of was trying to find my voice and find my way. But I always really loved drawing characters. I was a big comic book nerd. And so I kind of tried to find my way into that. And just like Imogene and a few of the other people here, Keith, Constantine, I ended up in costume. So I was working with costume designers a lot, and kind of translating, the different ideas that they were coming up with and stuff like that. But I got a job working on the first Captain America, and I was actually lucky enough to be in the office with Ryan and Charlie, working on that one. In a group. I think at one point the office flooded, and they put us in some weird like closet thing, like we were all working, and that was a big spark of inspiration for me, because the way that they were working, I had never really looked at concept art before. I was always kind of translating or just doing a finished illustration for, you know, a specific means, like Imogene said. So watching Ryan and Charlie paint and coming up with ideas and just the whole kind of avenue of that kind of really inspired me. But I was like, oh, that, I think I want to do that. Like, that's kind of what I wanted to do when I was coming into this. It kind of sparked that like childlike imagination for me. And then I got a job later on working on Man of Steel, and I got to work with Constantine Sekeris and Christensen, who also really pushed me to kind of help my artwork. So there was like a few different balances in between those two jobs that helped cement me into feeling like I wanted to be a concept artist, and kind of, you know, grow in that. And I think that when I get stuck, or when I feel like I'm trying to keep my inspiration going because I'm drawing constantly or coming up with ideas, I always realize that I'm stuck the most when I stop learning. So I think that one of the key things, I think, is if I feel like I'm stuck, I have to do some more research. I have to do a whole page of, you know, African masks, or I have to do a whole page of like looking at something or really cementing myself into the source material. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think in terms of when I wanted to be a concept artist, I remember growing up loving video games, of course, comics, and I remember early on always chasing, wanting to do those kind of images. And, you know, that eventually led me to working in video games, doing illustrations, and concept art in general. In terms of being inspired every day, I mean, just looking at the panel you have here, it's very hard not to be inspired by all their work. Especially when we were working in studio and working close together. You can just stand up and look around, and over here these amazing costumes are being made, and over here amazing keyframes are being made. And in that sense, it's very easy just to stay inspired, and because it makes you want to up your game constantly. And by being able to take on all these variety of projects, you know, it makes you gives you always a chance to maybe illustrate things and research things that you probably wouldn't have thought to research and illustrate if you weren't on that project. In that sense, you stay inspired as well.
Yeah, for me, I didn't know that I wanted to be a concept artist. I'm not really from an art background. I'm from Pakistan, but I knew like I've always been like a gamer, and I loved comics. And like over there, there weren't any like, there were always like pirated games, unfortunately. So that's all we would get. And like, there weren't any comic books. So there was a guy who used to like carry his little shop around, and he would get like recycled or like throwaway stuff from like Philippines or Hong Kong. And in those, sometimes you could find like comics, and I would just get those. I couldn't read English, so I would just like browse through it and look at all the images. But after like getting into college, I realized that I want to do something in video games, but I didn't know what it was called. And I went to the Academy of Arts, and I told them that, hey, you know, this is what I want to do. I remember I had like an art book from Marvel and this other video game called Chrono Cross. And I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And they're like, right. And they put me into animation. And for like 2 years, I did that. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then I realized that concept art was something that I wanted to do, and one of my teachers guided me to it. In terms of motivation, like John and Phil said, that like staying here, being here, like looking at all the people here and all their work is so amazing that you don't have any like you're always like motivated and do your best. But other than that, it's always are you like the golden age illustrators, and then video games, lots and lots of video games.
Well, I have to say, just going back into that, it's an extreme honor to actually be on this, you know, to sit on VisDev with all of these amazing artists. And I actually have the honor of asking the last question of our panel, which I'm going to ask to our fearless leaders, Mr. Ryan Meinerding and Andy Park. Want to know, for all the aspiring up-and-coming concept artists out there that are looking to do this job, what's a piece of advice that you can give them?
Andy, you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Phil. I think when it comes to up and coming future concept artists, at the end of the day, it all comes down to your portfolio. That's the bottom line. That's what all the companies will look at. That's what we look at. It's not, there's some people here that have gone to college, other people who haven't, who are self-taught. We've all had our different paths. But at the end of the day, the one thing that brings us together is our portfolio. So, back in the day, it's the physical portfolio that you show. Nowadays, it's, ArtStation, it's your website, showing your work. So I think when it comes to your portfolio, the main focus is to have a voice. I mean, I see a lot of different portfolios from young people. And the main thing that I see that happens a lot is that portfolios tend to be like all over the place, or they'll have there's this kind of thinking where you kind of, it's almost like they feel like they need to show that they can do everything. But the bottom line is we can't do everything. Usually we're good at one or two things. And usually the thing the one thing that you're focused on is the thing that you're most passionate about. For me, it's characters. So if you look at my portfolio, it's going to be a very focused, character-driven portfolio. So that would be my main advice to the young people out there, is to find out what is your voice and let it be reflected. When I open up a portfolio or when I go to a web page, within 2 seconds, I should be able to identify what type of artist you are. It doesn't mean you can't dabble in, environments, characters, creatures, props. You can do everything, but it really, usually your strength is in one thing, maybe, a couple things, and your portfolio should definitely reflect that, because that's what's going to make you stand out. When I open up a web page of an artist, when we're looking for artists, and then within 1 second, I'm like, okay, just by the thumbnails, you should be able to be like, oh, this has piqued my interest. I can tell this person is into characters, or this artist is more into creatures, or this person's, I see some keyframes. So you need to be able to have that readability. And then of course, when I click on those thumbnails, then, hopefully I get that, ooh, it held up to the thumbnail, like sometimes if you click on a thumbnail and it only looks good in a thumbnail, then that's not good either. But so the main thing is to find your voice when it comes to your portfolio. That's my advice. How about you, Ryan?
I think my advice is similar, but maybe a little bit sort of more philosophical, or I don't know. Maybe that's the right word. For me, it's always passion. Like, what is your passion? Like, let it drive you forward in everything you do. I think everybody here, being a commercial artist, working to improve your skills to be able to compete in an ever-changing industry with technology, with all the things that you could be working on, but now there's lots of other people that are trying to do the same jobs. As Andy was saying, everybody's been on their own journey, but let your passion drive you forward, and that's going to allow you to do the best work that you can do. I think for me, I took a lot of jobs in order to pay the bills. I took a lot of jobs because maybe, this looks like it could be the route to making a little bit more money. All that stuff is great. But the stuff that it was essentially going to be the way forward for my journey was, what do I love to do? I'm going to work harder at that if I'm driven by the passion to sort of, I'll stay up all night. I'll do anything to make this image better. Keith was mentioning before, we're just sort of driven to create images. If that's who you are, let whatever that is that makes you love art drive what you do, and it'll show in your work. It's one of the weirdest things to say, but some of the things that Andy was saying about, like, you should know what type of artist you want to be. That stuff is really about, like, what is going to make you stay up all night? What's going to make you work harder than everybody else? What's going to make you do the thing that nobody else has ever seen before? And the only way you can do that is be passionate and be inspired. Our jobs as concept artists are really to inspire people. We're trying to inspire whole worlds. We're trying to inspire the visuals of the MCU. We're trying to translate, the characters and the amazing moments from the comics. And as concept artists, we are primarily responsible for inspiring what that movie could look like. And if you're an inspired individual, if you are passionate, that's the one thing I think you got to take with you through everything you work on.
As much as I wish that we could have this conversation all day long, this actually concludes our conversation with Marvel Studios' visual development team. Thank you to everyone on this panel for joining us today. If you guys want to unmute, we can go ahead and give a round of applause. Well done, everybody. And I know for some time zones, we're actually getting quite late into the evening. So again, thank you for your time and your energy. I hope for those people watching, I hope that even through the screen, you can feel the warmth and respect that all of these artists have for one another. I think it's truly a special thing. Speaking for myself, it's an absolute blessing and privilege to get to correspond with them every day. They're not only clearly incredibly talented, but lovely collaborators, and just really wonderful people. We hope we get to see everyone and hug them again very soon, including to folks at home watching. Whether at home or in the studio, the team's going to continue cranking out awesome, cool work. And as the movies and TV shows from MCU's Phase 4 start coming out, you're going to be seeing these folks' designs come to the big and small screen. It's very exciting. Alrighty, and with that, we hope everyone stays safe, stay passionate, stay authentic, and stay inspired. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey,
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
Thank
I
you.
love it. Thank you.
Wakanda salute. Shoulders.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
Yeah.